This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites, like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies, like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee for your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
Hello and welcome to the Al Monitor Brief. It's April 5th. I'm Kristen Tallman. Today's main story is an interview with Badr Al-Saif on the elections in Kuwait. The polls, which closed at midnight local time, kept the status quo, handing opposition lawmakers a victory and a continued majority in the country's parliament. But first, let's get you caught up on the headlines. The White House on Thursday signaled a potential change to its support for Israel's war in Gaza if Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government does not implement specific, concrete, and measurable steps to limit further harm to civilians and aid workers. The UN Human Rights Council on Friday demanded a halt in all arms sales to Israel, highlighting warnings of genocide in its war in Gaza. The war has thus far killed more than 33,000 people. Major international aid groups warned Thursday it was now almost impossible to work in the enclave. In Tehran, Turkish Deputy Minister of Energy and Natural Resources Alparslan Bayraktar met with a series of Iranian officials on Thursday, kicking off technical talks aimed at deepening energy cooperations between the two countries. And on Friday, in the Iranian capital, thousands of people paid homage to the 7 Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps members killed in a strike in Syria. Iran has blamed the strike on Israel. In Israel, McDonald's operator in the country has agreed to sell its business to the parent corporation. And per reporting from Al Monitor, the United States is searching for diplomatic off-ramps to de-escalate the crisis in the Red Sea, where Houthi attacks on maritime shipping have imperiled both global trade and Yemen's fragile peace process. Now, on to the main segment. Hey, Badr, welcome to the Al Monitor Brief.
Happy to be with you, Kristen.
So you're on the ground in Kuwait, which just had an election yesterday. The polls closed at midnight. What's the mood like and what were the results?
Let me tell you, so this was a long night, random. It's rare that we have elections in the holy month of Ramadan, and hence the times have shifted around. And there was a buzz in the air. And this was quite interesting because, as you know, or maybe the listeners do not know, this is our 4th election in as many years. The Constitution, one of the oldest in the region, issued in 1962, gives the ruler the right to dissolve parliament only if there is a different reason for giving that dissolution forward. There were a couple of dissolutions in the past few years. And what happened was, as you know, you would think that there would be voter fatigue, given that there was an election after the other. But guess what? The voter turnout was really high. It was at around 62%, and it matches the voter turnout of the previous years. So if anything, and I call this the Kuwait model, if anything, if you go to another participatory system, you wouldn't see those numbers. Mind you, they wouldn't have elections year on, year off. So this is quite interesting, and it speaks to the keenness of Kuwaitis to, improve their system, work on it. And it also speaks to the uniqueness of the system itself, to allow this dissolution to come in without any time limits.
Wow. Okay. Many elections in the last couple of years to keep the population engaged. Tell me why this election is really important, or this incoming parliament will be really important for the country as a whole.
Kuwait is unique in the region for having a very active parliament that has a say in a lot of things. So it issues laws, it legislates, it monitors the performance of ministers in the government. It could sack ministers. It has changed governments. It put governments down in the past. But it also has a key role in voting for the crown prince, or the next in line to assume power in Kuwait. And Kristen, this is unprecedented in any monarchy in the region or in the world, really. The people have a say in the vote of their ruler, and we're still a monarchy. And how that happens is a crown prince is nominated by the emir, or the ruler of the country, and then that nomination goes to parliament. That nomination has to have a majority vote. If that nomination does not get a majority vote, then the ruler, the emir, has to present three names to parliament upon which they choose one of them. And the crown prince is really voted in as a deputy emir because he deputizes the emir in his absence or when he's sick. So what that does is when the emir is dead, when he passes away, the crown prince, the heir apparent, becomes the ruler automatically because he's been voted on as a deputy emir. You see how it is? So it's quite interesting, the mix, the thinking that came into the founding fathers of modern Kuwait and the writers of the Constitution is to engage in the tradition of participatory politics that colored Kuwait in the pre-oil era, and it just moved into the present time.
That's quite a unique model. And the thing about Kuwaitis are really a minority, correct, in their population. So what is it like? There's, to my understanding, 835,000 eligible voters, but the population in Kuwait is 4.3 million. So what is the mood like where there's a lower voting population versus the entire population living there?
And this is not uncommon in the region. The population imbalances have really come into the picture with the rise of the oil era, where small Gulf states that had been endowed with vast oil riches that needed, some infrastructure and development, and hence the rise of the expat population, which we considered, family, meaning that many of them have been living here for decades. And the numbers are more or less 70-30 or 65-35 in terms of, yes, there are close to 835,000 eligible voters, but we have around 1.5 million Kuwaitis, 1.6 more or less. The rest are expats. It's a mixed review. I mean, some of the expats are involved because many of them, they're in academic positions, they work in media, they work in business. So they're involved, they participate, they discuss things. Others in other kind of jobs are not so much involved. But, our numbers are even better than places like Doha or Dubai, where the local population is much smaller. Here, what you have is an interesting development in which our social media is very active. There is foreign press. People are active, whether they're living here or they're passing through. So they try to contribute each in his own way. I engage day on, day off with people from all different walks of life, Kuwaiti or non-Kuwaiti, in Kuwait, and impressively, they're all updated. I mean, they know what's happening. They follow up on what the MPs are doing, the ministers, because, they have a stake in the country. They live in it.
It's always good to hear that there's a engaged population. You're a leading expert in the region. Talk to me a little bit about what your initial analysis of the results are.
So let me tell you, I call this a game of musical chairs. And I expect a new showdown in the making after the results have come out. So why do I say this? So there was not much change, only 22% change ratio, which is one of the lowest, really. And if you dig deep down into the 22%, and let's zoom out a bit. So we were voting for 50 members of parliament. So when I say 22% have changed, that means there were only 11 new MPs or members of parliament. 3 were former MPs in previous parliaments, and a fourth was a member, but his membership was scrapped by a court ruling in the past, but now he won. So you're really talking about the same political class. And given that this is the same political class, this is more or less the same composition of MPs, you're going to have the same dynamics. And there was a showdown in the past, so there will be a showdown again. And, it could lead to yet another election. And to avoid this, my recommendation to our policymakers, whether it's members of parliament or government, is to cool it off, communicate, cooperate with one another, and try to work towards the best interests of Kuwait. Now, doing that alone is not enough. And I've called for this many times in the past. We need to restructure the political system. I think it's time, after 62 years of working in this constitution, to think of amendments to our parliamentary bylaws and to unleash a national dialogue that discusses the experiment that we've had in Kuwait. Do not underestimate the strength of Kuwait's brand. We are the only participatory system in a region that does not have such a thing. And for people to try and come out and express themselves. And by the way, that's one upside of having repeated elections. We're maturing politically in the process. So sometimes it's always viewed as a negative thing, but I try to see the positive in it as well. It's a mixed bag, really. And hopefully we'll come towards unleashing a new Kuwait.
Peter, thank you so much for joining. If there's any new amendments down the line, we'll be sure to be back in touch and have you inform our listeners.
Take care, Kristen. Thank you.
That's it for today, April 5th. You can read about all these stories and more at allmonitor.com.